So our focus today is going to be on user access reviews and followed with a little bit of discussion around segregation and duties. These two topics kind of fit hand in hand, which is the reason why they kind of lump together. Right. So when it comes to user access reviews, we're going to talk about the basic ideas behind why people need to do them. Then more from an open ad perspective in terms of how we create campaigns, what the reviewer interface looks like. We'll then talk a little bit about segregation of duties, and then we're going to spend a couple of minutes at the end to talk about the planned improvements, which are coming up over the next few months, and largely because this seems to be the single biggest driver behind um, why we see customers adopting OpenIAM, and I think in general it can be extended out to IGA solutions in general. Right? Okay, so a little background on user access reviews. They go by different names. Some people call it access certification. Other call it user access attestations. They got different permutations. They all basically mean the same thing. We're talking about reviewing access. Um, Most companies who are doing this do this on a periodic basis. They're usually doing some type of a review every quarter. These are usually your more sensitive entitlements, like which are in scope for your SOC compliance reviews. And then they have a more general review, which they do once or twice a year, which really includes most of the access that people have. The reason we do this is that we want to be able to reduce our security risk. That's at least one of the main reasons. So by reviewing access on a regular basis, we can detect and remove access which is no longer needed. We can remove access which is outdated. People tend to accumulate access over time. So you work on a project, you get access to something. You work on another project, you get access to something else. You change departments, you get new access. Unless we have a way of kind of reviewing what is no longer needed, either in a manual or an automated way, that access is going to accumulate, and 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 really where the problem comes from, right? And this is one of the reasons why I hate a feature which is part of the self-service portal, which allows you to clone rights. And when you clone rights, from one user to another, you're often accumulating, taking all the access that was accumulated, not really reviewing it and handing it over to the next person, right? And you kind of just taken the mess and then, made it twice as bad. Another reason why we do this is that it enables the concepts behind least privilege, meaning that you should not have access that you really don't need to do your job, right? So allowing you to kind of keep that access that you have limited to what you only need, and kind of go from there, right? It also keeps us ready for our audits, right? So having reviews in place on a regular basis, all the supporting evidence behind it, to control, how access was granted, who approved it, when was it given, any other details that might be needed. It keeps us ready to go when those audits, start. And there are a number of compliance activities which these access reviews these support. So we have our SOC reviews, GDPR, there's the CCPA, ISO 27001, there's HIPAA, and there are probably others. But in each one of these different regulatory requirements, we have a need to be able to prove um, that the access that people have, is really all they really need, and we have some controls around it. Okay. So that being said, doing these manually is not terribly easy, especially as organizations grow in size. They become more and more complex, more and more time consuming. So if you were to do it by hand, and some of you, already know how much fun that is, you have to first define the scope of the review. You then have to go and collect that data from all the different systems that are out there. So what a lot of people who I've known over the years who've been doing this before implementing an IAM solution, what they end up having are like scheduled tasks that will run out. export data, put it in a format which can be consumed, and then it gets brought into a spreadsheet, and massaged in some way, right? We then need to identify who the reviewers are, and then we need to get this review out to each person. And then after that, the even more fun part of this starts, which is you need to chase those people up to make sure that they did it. If there's anything that's consistent in our world, it's that everybody hates doing these. So the more data we throw at them, the more complex we make it, the less likely they're going to want to do it, and the longer it takes. And that causes a problem because when auditors come in, um, so there's a question that says, is it also in the roadmap to have role access review? Yes, it's actually going to be part of the 422 release, which is coming out in a few weeks. And so I know it's been requested for quite a bit of time, and it will be part of that review, that release. Sorry. Um, so these delays that happen, they have a real impact, which is that companies who are doing these audits, they have auditors coming in at regular intervals, and they expect this information to be ready, or you're going to fail the audit. And if you're a publicly traded company or a public sector company, that has some severe ramifications. So it's really important that these things are being, that we can streamline them and we can get these things done on time, and equally important that we can pass the audits, right? And typically the pattern that we're seeing, especially for like mid to larger enterprises, this process takes about 2 to 3 months. And for those companies which are doing quarterly, access reviews, it basically consumes the team which is managing this process, right? So like it leaves very little bandwidth to be able to do anything else except to go from review to review, and it's just a painful process. So if we do the user access reviews for OpenIAM, there's a bunch of areas where we can help to kind of streamline this, right? So one is around the whole topic of collecting data. So there's two kinds of systems that we can integrate with. There's one which is we have connectors for, and then we have another bucket which we may not have connectors for, or it's not possible to create a connector. For the ones that we have connectors, it's really easy. So those steps that we followed in the beginning when we were talking about user lifecycle management, where we imported the entitlements and when we imported the users and their entitlements, well, that's really what you need to be able to do these user access reviews, right? So that step that we did at that point was really creating a foundation for two things. It created a foundation for the user access reviews. It also created a foundation for the service catalog and the self-service portal. So it kind of became an essential step, at the start of a project to be able to get that in place, right? But then you're going to have these applications which don't have, they don't have a way for us to create a connector, or it's not practically feasible to create a connector for everything in the time frame that's available. So it could be an internal corporate roadmap to integrate X number of applications every year and to keep building this out. But to get the reviews done, what a lot of companies do is they have a manual process where they can get the data in a CSV file. They have those tools which are going to generate those files. And what we did at OpenIAM was we provided some standard templates to be able to load data for the applications and also the users and their entitlements. So if we don't want to do a lot of work, if we can get those CSV files into that format that we define, or we can adjust that format of the CSV to align with what the data that's coming in, we can load this data in, from a CSV file. But to make it a little bit more efficient, what we can do is we can have a scheduled task in OpenIAM that will go out pretty much on a nightly basis, look for new CSV files, pick them up, and process them, right? So this way the data in OpenIAM is always current. And the reason I'm recommending this, and it doesn't have to be nightly, it could be weekly if that's, but doing it nightly actually helps in a couple of different areas. One is that it puts us in a position that we can run these campaigns on demand. So either on a scheduled basis or when someone says, let's go, we're ready to go, right? The second thing the benefit of having these things run on a nightly basis, at least, is that when we revoke access from a system during a user access review, we need to be able to have proof that that access was actually taken away. And if we don't have the connectors to be able to pull that information and show that this access was removed on this date and time, then we have an audit problem, right? Like we have no proof to show that things that were taken away were in fact taken away, right? So if you run this on a regular basis, then your IAM system will say, well, okay, this role membership in, let's say, SAP HANA was taken away, on March 21st, and we picked up that evidence at say 6 p.m. when we ran the CSV file, right? So at least there's, some proof that this was closed out, right? So this is the benefit for running it on a regular basis. Another thing that where OpenIAM makes things a little bit easier is the whole campaign definition. So you can configure the campaign scope by picking the applications and the entitlements that you want to review. If, again, you're doing an entitlement-based review, or you can just pick the user population that's going to be in scope for that review, right? And as part of that campaign definition, you can define the reviewer flow, the SLAs, and the escalations that you want to follow. So the benefit of that is that there's a fixed amount of time that someone has to complete a review. If they don't get it, they're going to get a reminder. If they still don't do it, you can set it up so their boss gets a message. And then eventually it goes to their boss, right? And so at some point, there's going to be a boot that comes down and kicks that person in the rear to get things done. And, it saves the person running the UAR campaign to have to chase everybody up, right? The other part is also in the campaign, the user access manager's view, they can see the progress being made. They can see, the number of open reviews at each step of the review process, right? And then we can also schedule these things to run on a regular basis. For the auditors, the benefit is that there are reports out of the box that we can give them. There are also tools in the portal where they can go in and they can look up access, or they can run reports on their own to see when request was accessed, was approved, when it was revoked, those type of things. And because we don't want to really give open reign to your IAM system to the auditors, you can define an auditor role that will limit their access to the handful of things that they really need access to and keep them out of everything that they don't. So with that said, let's go and create a sample campaign and go through that process. Okay, so I'm going to log into the admin portal like we have in the past. And we go under access control, and there's a access certification menu to allow, and this will give you a list of all the campaigns that have been configured. In this case, let's go ahead and create a new campaign, right? And we can give it a user-friendly name, and we can call this, let's just say, UAR, test, and it's, March 24th, right? And then we can have, we need to select the type of campaign we're going to run, right? So there are two options. There's a user and an application. User means that you're going to pick the user population that you want to certify. Application means it's the entitlements that you want to review. In 422, there will be a few more options here. There'll be one for being able to review get just the roles, and there'll also be some configuration options to make it easier to do reviews of things like privileged accounts and service accounts. You can still do them today. It will make it easier in how you can configure these things. And the reason I'm talking about 422 is because it's only a few weeks away that we're going to be releasing it. And there are things in there which people have been asking for. Uh, so in this case, okay, thanks very much for the note. I appreciate it. You know, so let's pick a regular schedule. So we can say let's just every quarterly, and let's say we wanted to start. Yeah, we can have it start today, right? And then we can pick a mail template, and then I'm going to pick our trustee manager Jack here to be the UAR manager as well. The UAR manager in the context of this particular task, it is the person who has got oversight of this campaign and is basically the person responsible for making sure that it gets done, pulls the reports and things like that to give it to the auditors. So we define that. So there's a question that says, if you want a registration on the demo instance that we're using, how can we make it? Just drop us a note. We'll set up an account for you so you can play. We're looking at options of creating a separate demo instance where people can try it out because I tend to use this particular version, for the demos that I do. There's a second question is, will there be a webinar 422 presenting the new features? Yes, absolutely. We'll be doing that later in April. We will go over it in detail, and most likely we'll break it up into two parts, one covering workforce identity and another one covering customer identity, because there's some improvements which are there to both. Can campaigns be ad hoc or enhanced standard timeframes? Yes, you can run campaigns on your own. Um, if you want to bypass the defined intervals that we have, and you still want it automated, you could probably use the API to be able to trigger that. But this button over here that says execute now, you can run that anytime you want to. So you're not bound by this, and you can run one off. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more because that topic that you're bringing up, Jason, is an important topic, for us. Okay. All right, so we define basically the top level information. So since we're doing a application-based, access review, we're going to pick the applications we want. So in this case, let's pick AWS and let's pick AD. You know, and now if this was a user-based review, we would not see this list of applications. We would see a filtering set of options of how or which user population do you want to pick. And one of the things at 422 that we do is we kind of blend these two things a little bit better, because sometimes companies want to do, say they want to manage the entitlements for people in a certain population, right? Like if you're a large multinational corporation, you may want to do, say all the people, say in North America, for example, or in the US or in a certain division, and then pick the entitlements for it, right? So these parameters are becoming more flexible as we go forward in time. Okay. So here I'm going to say that I want to pick the entitlements. I could have just said all, in which case it would pick everything here, but that wasn't the point of this. So let's say we're going to do AWS, and we're going to pick, say, AWS administrator, this guy, and you can see it's got an owner, and then there's a couple more that I want to pick. So let's see if I can find this guy. So we're going to add that, and then we're going to add one more. And you can see that there's different owners which are there in each one of these. Now let's do the same thing with AD. We'll pick a few, things that we want to do there. So let's do, domain admins. We'll do domain controllers, and let's put something nonsensical here. And this one's got the security manager. Okay. So next part is let's define the flow. So let's say we want the supervisor to be the first reviewer. We're going to send them a reminder after 3 days. We're going to send them one reminder. This is the template we're going to use. And now we can say, let's say, entitlement owner. And we'll do the same thing there as well. Okay. And I'm going to save this at this point. Now, if I wanted to, on this reviewer screen, add escalation steps, I can say something like this. I can say, escalate to that person's supervisor, um, and again, we're going to send them a reminder once. We're going to add, and then let's say, in this case, we want to go um, to this, maybe it's a security manager or, somebody higher up, right? That we want to pick. And so let's say, we do the same thing there, right? So now we can, I think I messed this up somewhere. The idea is that you can build out a whole chain of escalations, right? That you can send out reminders to kind of, ensure that things get done on time. Okay, and so once we have this, let's go ahead and say execute now. Okay, so within a few seconds, yeah, I started getting email notifications. Let's refresh this, and we should see our campaign coming through. It's a small campaign with only 8 people in it. So at this point, let's go ahead and log out and come in as Jack, right? Because that's the UAR manager. Okay, so at this point, it's going to go. I'm going to click on user access reviews. This is going to take a minute to load. This is one of those things that's been addressed in the 4.2.2 release in terms of the overall performance of the entire backend. It's been optimized to be a lot more responsive and deal with much larger data sets. So um, so this was the campaign that we just triggered. The user access test from March 24th. We can see that there's 2 steps. There's the first step is going to the supervisor, next to the entitlement owner, how many reviewers there are each step. Okay. So if we go here, we see the people who are here in this first review. I can go one by one. So I can review this and I can see, yeah, it's okay. This really may not be the best way that you want to do this, right? Because you're going to go one by one. And while this test only has a handful of users, in reality, many of our customers have hundreds of people that they have to review each time. So this is not the most practical way of going about it. I mean, you can if you so desire, but there's another way. So in this case, we're going to be using the pivot view. So the pivot view gives us a list of all the users, and in the applications which are in scope, kind of laid out in a matrix. And we can filter this if you want to see a subset of this grid if you want to. And each one of these options will tell you something about them, right? So in this case, this entitlement is coming from AD. There could be more detail depending on how we populated it. For each one of our users, we'll see some details about them here as well, right? So at this point, I can say, well, I'm going to revoke this. And if I wanted to leave some comments or some attachments, I can do so here. Otherwise, I can say, it's all fine. And I can say these guys are all right. And I'm going to revoke this as well, right? So the idea is that by seeing people closer together, we can run through them a lot faster. Um, and it would just become a lot more effective. Now, all that being said, in 4.2.2, there's 2 things that you're going to care about. One is the UI is more responsive because the backend has been improved and is much more scalable to larger data sets and working with it. So you won't be waiting the way that we just did just now. Second is the topic that we're going to talk about in a second. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because you need to put it in the context of the UI, is that the segregation of duties feature is going to be integrated. So wherever we see SoD violations on here, that entitlement is going to get tagged. And you'll be able to look into it to see if you want to override it or you want to fix it, right? But it's going to get highlighted over here, right? And then the release after that is going to be coming out in the summertime. We're adding risk scoring into that mix. So the risk scoring will basically anytime there's a change in an entitlement's risk score, it will get tagged. So you'll have SOD being highlighted, and anything that triggers the risk parameters to change, they will show up. And the idea is that we want to be able to be able to have a UAR which doesn't have to have 100 or 1,000 entitlements that people have to review. That the idea is that you can provide that as one view, but the another view would be just to look at those things which are considered risky, right? And the reason for that is when you put a large review in front of someone, they have a tendency to want to rubber stamp, and that defeats the whole purpose of this, right? So by honing in on those things which are considered risky, meaning that other people in this job may not have this type of permission, or that the permission changed from the last review, something new was added, right? The person's job title changed, and that for these things may need to be reevaluated. Whatever those parameters are that determine that the risk levels have changed, they will get highlighted. And the goal is to allow you to get through this review significantly faster. Question is, will there be an option to filter or group reviewable users by title and job function? By title, there is a filter for that in 422, which you will be able to use. So you'll be able to organize them by title, by their supervisor, by their organizational unit. So imagine, people in a similar title, different departments. You'll be able to use a few different criteria to be able to limit the data set that you're looking at over here. Again, in a large review, could be, even in a pivot view, way too much data to be able to deal with and effectively, right? There's also parameters there to be able to sort the data as well, right? So to kind of look at things a little bit differently. Hey, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and say process this page, and this way we can continue. And at that point, I can go over to my administration tab, and I can see where we stand, right? We'll see that some reviews are done, others are pending, and so this gives me kind of a picture of what's going on. If something is completed, it could be that there was no second reviewer, that it didn't exist, and therefore the review completed. There's also some things in here where you can, autocomplete, for example. Can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but there are cases where that might be applicable, right? Or you may say, all right, here's an example. You may have two steps, a supervisor, and you may have an entitlement owner. Well, if they're the same, then only one of them has to review. You don't need to have the same person do the same review twice, right? It's kind of, that point becomes a little ridiculous, right? Some other things in this interface is you can take these, for example, let's say the security manager is away on vacation. We can decide to delegate this out to someone else if you want to, right? And this way the review can continue, get done on time. We can also send messages to that person from here saying, hey, we're running out of time. Can you please make sure this gets done by tomorrow, right? You don't have to extract out each person's email, go to your mail client and send it out from there. And when it comes to reports, there's really one report format that's there by default. I'm going to bring that down for you in a second, but okay, well, that didn't work out so well. let's see if I can get this. So the scope report gives you a view of data before the audit started. So it's all the people and all the entitlements which are being reviewed. The current state is the review at this moment in time. And the result report is a review at the end. So let's see if I can get a copy of that report. Nope, no such luck today. And yeah, so but anyway, I think we can share a copy of it afterwards, and we post up this session. We'll include a copy of that report as part of that posting. Okay. At this point, like I can log in as an extra viewer and go through the same drill, but it's the same thing, so I don't see any point in that. Let's go back to the last couple of slides on the user access review and also what's planned, um, for the upcoming releases. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the user access reviews. Let's talk about segregation of duties. So in the current version, there's some light capability, and it really relies on scripting to be able to do this. So it's not remotely as useful or as elegant as we would like it to be. So in 422, we introduced the beginnings of the first SoD, set of functionality. And the idea behind segregation duties is that we want to have controls in place where we ensure that people are not going to have the ability to perform conflicting tasks or to perform two tasks which are of high risk, right? So it allows us to kind of split up the work between two different groups of people, and ensure that there's no it reduces the possibility of fraud and controls around this, right? So examples of bad combinations of access, right? We have a user who can and a company who could maybe create new vendors and also approve payments to them, right? That's probably asking for a little bit of trouble. From an IT perspective, right? A person who can provision accounts and approve access to them, right? So you're friends with somebody on the admin side, they create an account for you, they grant some privileged group access, right? That's really kind of like a bad scenario. So the idea is that we define rules around what is not allowed. And then once we have them, then we need to have tools on how we can monitor that access, right? So the SOD UI in OpenIAM that we're introducing here basically allows you to define the combinations of entitlements, your roles, your groups, which cannot exist together, right? So for example, in this, I'm saying that somebody in an HR role can't also be the security manager, right? It's kind of looking at another example where I can create a new account or a new person, and I can also grant them access to whatever I may want to or approve their access, right? So those kind of combinations would be viewed as being toxic, right? So in addition to being able to define these rules, then in OpenIAM, whenever you request access for something, or when you're doing the user access reviews, it will trigger off an SOD violation scan. So it will make sure that the access that you're asking for doesn't violate an SOD policy. If it does, it will throw up a warning. There is an option there to be able to override it. If you override it, then in the audit logs, it will say that the person requesting this overrode the SOD policies, and the reviewers will also see that the requester is knowingly overriding this, right? And each person can then act on that on their own, right? Um, there might be cases where it may be needed, right? Um, and as I mentioned before, on the user access reviews, it'll be highlighted clearly, it'll be color coded to show that you have an SOD policy violation, right? Beyond this, there's ongoing monitoring, I mean, ongoing scanning the system, to know when these violations occur, right? Because the violations can occur at any given point in time. It could be somebody changed the rules, or maybe somebody went in outside of OpenIAM, granted a group or a role membership, And now when you do a nightly sync, you see that all of a sudden there is a problem here. And you want to be able to tag that and be able to take some actions against it. Right? And all of this ultimately feeds into, making those audits a little bit more effective. So, and then, as I mentioned, where are we going to go with this? A big thing in the release this summer is going to be adding risk scoring to be able to define parameters and know, when we have a higher level of risk. And then that um, that level of that risk score from a context of UAR could be, if something changed from one review to another, to be able to indicate to users, to the person who's reviewing, that there is a change here, and to make the review process more streamlined, easier to get through, and go from there, right? The other part, and this goes back to Jason's question, is about the ad hoc user access reviews. So one of the things that will be there in this release is that the system will proactively trigger a user access review anytime, again, if we configure it as such, that there's a change in the risk score, that it will cause a review of that entitlement or that block of access, which is causing the risk score to go up, so that it gets reviewed immediately and we don't wait for the quarterly user access reviews, right? And again, the goal here is to make the reviews simpler, but also to improve security at the same time, right? Another big thing that's in the summer release is that the UI for the reviewers is going to be completely refactored. Hopefully, it will become significantly easier for everybody, right? So it's been kind of our goal all along, but as the different types of customers that we work with, more feedback we get, we're taking into account to kind of come up with a UI which will hopefully make this very simple, and people can get through this in a fraction of the time, right? And then ultimately, so one more thing about this is that right now all the audit logs are kept inside Elasticsearch, and the workflow data is kept inside the activity, packets of information. The data that's in activity is not terribly easy to report on. So as part of this, we'll have a separate schema to keep track of these access review type of information, which that, along with the data in Elasticsearch, will make it easier for us to report on, and also open up options in the kind of reports that we can deliver, what we can show on the dashboard, and things like that. Right. But this is more or less what we had planned for our session today. If there are any questions, happy to take them. If not, I will see you on Thursday.